Thank you for coming and joining. And once again, I'm Dr. Mary Cook. I'm the ACT coordinator for Metro Nashville Public Schools. And this is our final ACT prep session for our series for 2022. And today we're going to go over some general ACT strategies. So these are strategies that will address the test as a whole. We'll do some review of some of the subject specific areas as well. But most of the information that we'll cover are just kind of general things so that you're ready to take the entire test. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Coles.
Hello, Miss Megan. So I'm the literacy coach at Maplewood High School, and I think this is my 24th year. I taught English for about 21 years. So I'm going to share some of these strategies. If you were in any of the other webinars, you may recognize me from the English and reading one. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is to understand the layout of the ACT test and to understand the importance of test taking strategies and to learn about some of them. So when you were in the English session, we had English specific strategies, and then there are math specific strategies and reading specific strategies and science, but these strategies are across the board. Okay, so first of all, let's just review the 4 parts of the ACT. The first part is English, of course, and the English section has 75 questions with 5 passages, and it takes 45 minutes to do that. And math has 60 questions for 60 minutes. Reading has 40 questions, and that breaks down to 4 passages with 10 questions each, and you have 35 minutes to do that. Science has 40 questions with 7 passages, and you have 35 minutes to do that. And of course, the highest you can get on the ACT is a 36, and each of the sections you can get 36, and then you get an average to get your score. All right, so on this slide, we're going to go into how that breaks down, and if you are looking at the English test, you have 45 minutes to do it, right? And you have 75 questions. Well, if you do the math, that only gives you 36 seconds to focus on each question. So obviously there are strategies to help you to get the best answer in the least amount of time. So I just want to review the key strategy for the English section. Basically, less is best. On English, less is best. That means often the least wordy answer is the correct answer, and this test measures English. Reading measures reading. So on the English test, if you come to a question that is wordy, you want to guess with the bubble of the day and keep going, because on the English section, we're only looking at grammar. So I don't know if you remember, I showed you some different kinds of questions in the English, and the majority, I'd say about 50-ish questions, when you look at the passage and you go to the side and you get that first question. Number 1, A is always, or F, those are interchangeable, are always no change. These are the questions we want to focus on. The ones where the first option is no change. Okay, so if you focus on those short questions, there are about 50 of them, and you guess on the other 25, you can still make a 21 on the English section. So to reiterate, on the English section, focus and remember, less is best. If the least wordy answer makes sense, that's the answer I'm going to go with. If I look at the question and the first option isn't no change, I'm going to bubble in my bubble of the day, and I'm going to keep going, because those long questions are just trying to pull you in and make you use your time. Okay, so I'm going to skip to reading, and then Dr. Cook is going to review the math and science with you. So the third test is reading, and there are 35 minutes to do reading. Well, there are 4 passages with 10 questions each. And I, even with a doctorate degree, to read a passage, as long as they are on the ACT, it's going to take me a little bit longer. You know what I mean? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be strategic. I'm going to mark a bubble of the day for passage 1, because passage 1 is often the longest passage, and passage 1 often has like A and B comparison. And those comparisons are pulling a short story and comparing it to a novel, or it's comparing 2 novel excerpts, or it's comparing 2 story excerpts. And we don't have time to do compare contrast, because if I answer questions that are comparing and contrasting passages, that means I'm probably going to have to go back and reread the passages to understand enough to get the answer. So on that first passage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 1 through 10, and I'm going to do the same column all the way down, right? So if I'm picking A as my column of the day, then I'm also going to do F. And I'm not even going to worry about that first passage. And I'm going to go straight to the next one because it's probably shorter, and I'm going to do that. So if you break it down to 2 passages for reading out of the 4, and you decide that's your strategy. When I get to the reading section, I'm going to read 2 passages, and I'm going to do a really good job on them. I'm going to spend 15 minutes on one. I'm going to spend 15 minutes on another, and that's going to give me 5 minutes to make sure I've got everything bubbled in correctly. Then that's it. If you just do 2 passages, you can get a 19 or 20 on the ACT reading part. So I don't know if you remember when I went through the reading webinar, you want to get 2.5 passages read to get at least 26-ish questions answered, because that's going to be your 21-22 key. So to reiterate, on the English section, the major strategy is to focus on the least wordy answer, if it makes sense, and focus on the least wordy questions. On the reading section, I would go for 2.5 passages. I would just guess the same column all the way on the first passage because it's the most difficult, and keep going. Okay, so I'm going to give you the torch, Dr. Cook, to review the math and science.
And I want to excuse me, I want to back up what Dr. Coles just said. I'm doing some trainings with ACT right now, and part of my training is I have to take an ACT. I just have to do one subject at a time, so it's a little bit of a bonus, but I am doing an actual ACT test, one subject at a time, timed just like you guys are doing, and I have to achieve a certain score to pass and be certified in this program I'm doing. And I'm using exactly the same strategies that Dr. Coles and the other presenters have used, because my background is math. I have a degree in mathematics, and English and reading have always been the areas that kind of tripped me up. And so using exactly the strategies that Dr. Coles just described, I've been able to get those scores. And it's like, I know you're thinking, yeah, you already have degrees and all this kind of stuff. It's been a long time since I've been in high school, like a really long time. And the skills that you guys have as high schoolers, you're kind of at a really sweet spot for these types of tests, because you're having to do this work consistently on a daily basis with your teachers. Once you get out into the real world, the test taking skills kind of fade away. The content that you're learning stays with you, but the ability to take these tests and strategize with them, that's something that you guys are practicing much more frequently than what you do as an adult. And so these strategies have been helping me in that program too. Now, to segue back to math, and since I just said that's my degree, I got my degree in math in 1987. So yeah, I am older than dirt. But that also means I've forgotten a lot of math that I haven't used. I taught middle school, and nobody in middle school does trigonometry, and trig shows up on the ACT. And so it's been a minute or two since I've done trig, and when I was looking at those questions, it's like, yeah, I don't remember this. I remember the names, I remember the SOHCAHTOA stuff, I remember saying SOHCAHTOA, but applying it, forget it. It's been many decades. And so the big thing on the math, it's the only test in the entire ACT that starts out easy and gets harder as you go. It gets into the more advanced topics the later you go into the test. So the first part of the test, the first 20 questions or so, are your algebra and geometry. So algebra 1, basic geometry. And if you can focus on getting those first 20 right and use those basic skills, that gives you your foundation. There's 60 questions, 60 minutes. That's 1 minute per question. So that's kind of your pacing. And then if you get to those questions where you go, yeah, I don't have a clue, mark a bubble, move on. You have a bubble of the day, same thing Dr. Coles was just talking about, mark the bubble, move on. Even if it's in those first 20, if you get into one of those word problems that has a lot of words, a lot of reading, and you're gonna have to pull it apart, mark a bubble, move on. And then at the end, come back and work on those if you have time. And especially when you get into the more advanced topics, if you haven't had trig yet, if you haven't had some of that more advanced mathematics and it's coming up, you just haven't had it yet, it's okay. Mark your bubble of the day. And then if you need to go back and look at some of those word problems earlier in the test and really pull them apart and understand what each section is asking and what it's saying, that will help you figure out the answer. But use that bubble of the day strategy. Just know the earlier part of the math test is easier than the later part. It's more foundational skills and more foundational topics. For science, it's very similar to reading in the sense that there's 35 questions and you have 40 minutes to do it. So it's a long test. ACT is a long test, but as you can see, the last 2 sections after the break, they are shorter. They're only 35 minutes, and they have fewer questions, 40 questions each. On the science, the big thing on that is just the opposite of reading. Reading, you have to read the passages. On science, don't read the passages. Go straight to the questions. The questions in science will refer to charts and graphs and diagrams. And the majority of them do not have anything to do with reading any of the setup. As a matter of fact, that's where students start freaking themselves out because they start reading all this science terminology that may not be familiar to them. And it has nothing to do with answering the question. The question is going to ask about, based on this table, what are the patterns with the numbers? And if we did this one thing, what would the numbers be then? And it doesn't even matter if it's this big, long science word that has 17 letters in it and only one of them is a vowel. It's just look at the patterns of the numbers or look at the diagram of this experiment, what's happening in this diagram. So the terminology is important when you're in the science class, but the terminology really doesn't impact the ACT science test itself. So go straight to the questions first, start working on those and looking back at the charts and the graphs and the diagrams to answer those.
So to piggyback on what she just said, I'm not saying do this, but when I was in high school back when the dinosaurs were here in 1990, I took the ACT and I was not good at math at all. Like, not at all. My trigonometry teacher actually asked me why I was taking math, because when I was in high school, you didn't have to have 4 or 3 years of math. You only had to have 2 when I was in high school. And high school for me was 10 through 12. So I guess you needed it 9th grade. So that would be 3, not 4. So anyway, she got me to leave her class. And so I became a teacher's aide. I was that bad at math. And I had a professor say the same thing with the math. He basically gave me a D because I was so bad and he didn't want me to have to retake the class. But my point is, I had learned early on that the first 30 questions on that math section are the easiest. And those are the ones that I tried to get correct. And then I just put B all the way down, which of course, it goes A, B, C, D, and then F, G, whatever. I did the same column all the way down and I got a 19 on math. And I was happy with that because I'm not a mathematician. So focus on getting those first 30 questions. And then on the science, I've been a teacher a long time and I was working with a student and he took the ACT as a junior and his lowest score was science. He got a 12. And he came and sat down with me. I'm like, come let me help you. And I'm not a science person again, but I gave him the simple strategy that Dr. Cook just said. Look at the graph. And then this kid's name was Matt. And I said, Matt, look at this question right here. Don't even get focused on what the passage is about. What is the question asking? And he's like, oh, I don't have to read the passage. It's like, you focus on the question. He goes, it's just telling me to go to the graph. I'm like, right. And he was like, I was so confused because I thought I was supposed to be answering relation to the passage, and I read the passage and it freaked me out. So when he took the ACT again, I think he took it like 2 months later, he got a 21 on science. He went from a 12 to a 21, only focusing on the question. So yes, don't let that freak you out. Okay, so I'm seeing, yay, we have more people join us. If you guys have any questions, feel free to get on your mic and ask us or type it in the chat. Okay, so make certain that every question has an answer. Leave nothing blank. Use a bubble of the day. Okay, so I'm going to get into general strategies over the entire test. All right, the first one is don't cram. Don't wait until the Monday night, February 28th, to sit down and go, okay, I'm going to do this practice test now. If you're going to use practice tests to help you get more comfortable and confident in what you're about to do that now. Get it over with. Go through, make yourself familiar with the types of questions you struggle with. You know, do a little bit of every day. Don't wait till Monday and say, okay, I'm going to really focus on ACT right now. Do a little bit in small increments, which I bet most of you are because you're taking the time for this webinar. General ACT strategy number 2, get a good night's sleep and eat breakfast. You know, having taught school a long time, students show up to my 7 a.m. class and they haven't had breakfast because they say they're not hungry, but then at about 8, they're starving. Make sure you eat breakfast, even if you don't normally eat it. Just something small, because if you don't, you're going to start dragging and get sleepy. So sleep is beneficial too. Make sure you get plenty of sleep. You know, it's not the same for everybody, and have some breakfast so you don't get sleepy or hungry during the test. General ACT strategy number 3, familiarize yourself with the test before the test day. So like I said, I know Dr. Cook in the email she sent you, the practice test, look through it, practice some questions, try to understand why you missed what you did, and that way you go in and you're confident on the day you take the test. And a good strategy is just, you know, the ones that you miss, go and look and see why you missed them and try to make sure that you're avoiding those questions. Like, for example, the question says, which is not an example. Make sure you get yourself ready for those and don't let yourself miss those easier questions. General ACT strategy number 4. Of course, answer the easy questions first and then guess on the others. So in English, the hard ones are sprinkled in. The easier ones are the short questions that have the first answer option, no change. The more difficult are the ones that take the longest time. So you want to focus on getting those short ones correct. On math, the easier questions are the first 30. So you want to focus on those. On reading, the hardest passage is one that requires the most effort, but ironically, the first passage is also the one that seems most interesting to us. It doesn't matter whether it's interesting or not. The first one takes the most time because it's longer and it's literature. And literature passages, the questions are more complicated and complex, and that will pull up your time. So guess on those first 10. On science, it goes from easy to difficult. So you want to focus on those first questions to get those correct. General strategy number 5. You only need to get half the answers correct on the entire test to get a 21. That's right. You only need to get half the questions correct on all 4 subtests to get a 21 composite on the ACT. Focus on answering at least half of the questions on each subtest correctly. That doesn't mean leave the other half empty. Do your bubble of the day on the rest. No one has any questions. The chat box is completely blank. Okay. General ACT strategy number 6. right in the booklet. Use it. Underline, make notes, work your problems out. And some people think it's a good idea to write your answers in your booklet and transfer them over 10 at a time. Whatever works and whatever doesn't distract you and make you fumble up your time, do it. Budget your time wisely. Each section is timed. Keep in mind how much time you're spending on a question. Guess and move on if needed. Take practice tests with the timer set to learn the pace needed to answer all the questions. And we're going to come to this at the end. It's a good idea to have just a handy old school watch to put on the table so that you can keep up with your time, because people who proctor the ACT, they're only required to give you a minute warning. So you might be working along and think you've got a good pace and then get to like number 50 on the English section and realize you have a minute left and then have to hurry and bubble in. It'd be a good idea to find one of those old school watches. ACT strategy number 8, read carefully to avoid careless mistakes. Some questions include the word not, which is easy to miss if you're reading too quickly. Read carefully so you get the easier questions correct. General ACT strategy number 9, don't change your answers. Trust your gut by sticking with your initial answer choice. Otherwise, you might cause an error by not erasing the bubble well enough. So, for example, if you're on the English section and you are working and you're going to only focus on answering the 50 shorter questions, and you decide you're going to guess with the bubble of the day on the longer ones, but you might want to try to go back. So the ones you guess on, you want to darken it in enough so that it can be counted, but then not so heavy that if you want to erase it, when you go back and try to do it, if you have enough time, you won't get it wrong. General ACT strategy number 10, mark an answer for every single question, even if you must guess. There is no penalty. That's supposed to be there are no penalty. There is no penalty for wrong answers. Only points awarded for correct ones. Make certain every item has a bubble filled in, even if you have to guess or use your bubble of the day. I'm telling you, I've proctored the ACT, I don't know how many times over the past 15 years. And even though I would tell my students this, every time I would pass by, I walk around when I'm proctoring, I would see students all the time leave answers blank, like completely not remember the bubble of the day thing. Keep that in your toolbox. And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't be like, hey, remember, mark an answer, because as a proctor, you can't do that. Like the only thing I can do is make sure you have your pencils and things and give you that minute warning. Do not leave answers blank. Okay. Now, even though your school will probably have pencils for you, calculators, snacks, you might feel more confident if you bring the items yourself already. So have some good number 2 pencils, not the lead kind, the actual number 2 yellow pencils. See the little item here on the side, that old school yellow pencil. Calculator, you're not going to be able to use your phone. In fact, your phone will be, I'm sure, taken up and put a Post-it on it. If you don't own a calculator, don't go out and buy one. I'm sure they'll have one available. But if you do have one, make sure it has fresh batteries. Again, most schools will bring a snack, but if you're like me, I like particular things. Like I like to have my peanut butter pretzels. So bring something that you like that'll be your little treat in your break. And a watch, not an Apple Watch, not a smart watch, just an old-fashioned one that only tells time. Also, it can't make any sound. Okay. And there we have it, kids.
So basically, you've been with us, most of you have been with us for multiple weeks, and you're ready. You are, we're doing this test on Tuesday. It's the state-funded test. Go into it confident and relaxed. Go in, it's like, I'm going to prove what I know, and what you don't know, guess on and move on. It's okay. One of the things to remember is this may be your first time taking the test. And you can approach it as a practice test because you will have another opportunity in the fall that the state funds. It's called the Senior Retake. It's in early October. So you do this test, you'll get the results back, you'll see how you do, and then you can use those results to prepare for the one in October as well. So this is not a one and done. This isn't, you know, a make or break deal. So just relax, go into it, do the best you can. I'm going to do another webinar. When we were talking with the 230 crew, they wanted another webinar in April or so, once you start getting your score reports back, to explain how to read that score report and how to use those results to help you work on improving your score and target the areas of needed attention, and how to understand what all is included on those documents, because there's a lot of information. Most people just look at what the composite score is and, hey, I got this, and then they ignore all the rest of it. But there's a lot of important information on there that can really help you do better the next time around. With that, feel free to come off from mute or put questions in the chat, because that really is it. This is our shortest webinar. There wasn't a whole lot of other things. You guys have heard a lot of information already over the weeks. What is it that you need us to review? What is it that you still have questions on? What do you feel like you need support with? We're here for you. And if there isn't anything, you're also welcome to go. That's totally up to you as well. You're very welcome, Jaden. You're very welcome for the advice. I hope it's helpful, and we look forward to seeing how you do. Anyone else? All right, if nobody has any questions, you have a really good day. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Bye-bye.